We'll talk about that with Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware. But first, in studio with me here in Washington, Missouri Republican Senator Roy Blunt on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And Senator Blunt, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. You were just listening to Rudy Giuliani. What did you hear in there that you think is important, Senator?
Well, you know, I did hear the Rudy Giuliani mention again that the president is not going to try to stop the Mueller investigation. He'd just like to have it come to a conclusion, and I think that's pretty much where I am and the whole country is right now. Let's get the facts, let's get this done, find out what there was to find out, and move on. And I heard him once again say that. Just like I've said, I don't think we should make it impossible for the president to fire Mueller by congressional action, because I don't think we have the right to do that, but I think it would be a foolish thing for the president to do, to take that action that he probably has under the Constitution.
The mayor suggested he's not going to fire anyone.
Absolutely.
The president refers to this FBI informant matter as Spygate. Should the government have an informant connected with a national campaign?
I think it'd be fine to find out what the Russians were doing. It would not be fine to find out what the campaign was doing. I'm frankly concerned about a lot of the things we saw happen between the FBI and both campaigns getting involved with the Clinton campaign at two different times, both of which I thought reached questionable conclusions. And then if you actually did have someone trying to find out from the campaign what was going on in the campaign and who they were talking to, as opposed to legitimately having reasons to believe that they should be there. We'll see. It's taken a long time to get this information from the FBI and, frankly, from the national security team.
No. On North Korea, you said this past week that the North Koreans like to pretend to negotiate. Right. What was all of this about this past week? Was that just pretend?
Well, who knows? You know, it's right out of the North Korean playbook. We're into 3 generations of that playbook now. Act like you want to negotiate, then come up with some outlandish view of what that negotiation means, and try to wind up with early benefits to your side and not following through on what you've agreed to do. So it's not surprising, I don't think. What was probably surprising to them was the president's agreement initially to meet, and then his willingness to say, hey, if this is it's not a serious meeting, I don't want to have it. I do think some things need to happen here before we meet, and hopefully they will.
Maybe the Korean leaders meeting yesterday was another one of the surprises in a long list of surprises. Your colleague, Democrat Bob Menendez, Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This came up on Thursday with Mike Pompeo, and he said this about the Korea summit.
The art of diplomacy is a lot harder than the art of the deal. The reality is that it's pretty amazing that the administration might be shocked that North Korea is acting as North Korea might very well normally act.
Sometimes I think that sounds like you would describe it. Is he right about that?
Well, I think the quote's not all that surprising, that you'd suggest that somehow the president isn't reaching out the way he should. I think the president's got the North Koreans in a place that any other president might not have managed to get done. He's very willing to reach out in new directions through the South Korean president, willing to meet with the North Korean president, but also willing to walk away. And I do think some things need to be decided before we have that meeting. There needs to be a strong understanding of what both sides, what all 3 sides, frankly, mean by denuclearization. We've got the South Korean president, I believe, providing a great benefit in this discussion unless we're not all communicating in the same way. You know, what does denuclearization mean? What do they expect to see happen? And I think these talks can produce results. But we need results, and they need to be very visible before the United States creates any benefits.
It's a very interesting comment. I think you need a bit of trust, too, to get that back on track, and we'll see whether that happens. On Iran, quickly, Mike Pompeo set out a dozen items that he wants the Iranian regime to go ahead and meet. We'll put them on screen. Here's a few of them, and these are big issues, too. Abandon the nuclear program, provide full access to inspectors, end support for terror groups, end ballistic missile program, release U.S. citizens, and on the list goes. A lot of demands. Iran has said it has no incentive to negotiate with the U.S. government that rips up a nuclear deal. That seems like it's a stalemate. If it is, what's plan B?
Well, first of all, the agreement with Iran was an agreement that would allow them to eventually have a nuclear weapon, and it wasn't an agreement that our government ever entered into in the way the government enters into agreements. It was an agreement that the president said he was for, understanding the Congress would never verify the agreement we had just entered into. We ought to learn from what's happened in 20 years with North Korea, what we don't want to allow happen with Iran. We do not want them to be able to have a nuclear weapon. The current deal allows that. We do not want them to be testing ballistic missiles, which they're doing. And they have to stop this worldwide effort to create terror activity all over the world.
Can you pressure the Europeans to go along with that?
Well, we'll see how aggressive the president wants to be with the sanctions. It actually will depend on what we decide our sanctions will be against governments and businesses that deal with this Iranian government. Is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, and frankly, for the last several years, they've been financing that terrorism with the pallets full of money that we gave them back.
Senator, thank you for your time, especially on holiday weekend. Roy Blunt from Missouri. Thank you, sir.